We truly believed the great silence meant we were alone. We saw the universe as a vast, empty room, a grand inheritance gifted just to us. Our star science was young but brilliant. We charted the heavens with boundless optimism. We saw the spiraling galaxies not as cosmic dangers, but as future destinations. Our first small colonies were thriving, little pinpricks of light on Mars and Europa's moons. We were humanity ascendant, stepping confidently into our future. The stars were beautiful decorations in our sky. They were certainly not warnings. We thought the silence was peace. Then the silence was broken, not by a sound, not by a message. It was broken by a shadow. It fell upon Kepler 186f first, our most promising extrasolar world, a garden planet we called Second Chance. The light from its parent star just stopped. One moment it was there. The next, an impossible circle of perfect blackness hung in its place, a hole punched into the fabric of space itself. Our astronomers were baffled. They offered theories of strange star-born physics, unseen black holes, phenomena beyond our understanding. They were trying to soothe a nervous public. But the shadow moved. It drifted with unnerving purpose from that dead system. It headed toward another of our fledgling outposts. The pattern became undeniable. Another star winked out. Another world of pioneers went dark. This was not nature's random hand. It was methodical. It was deliberate. We were not alone after all. And the beings who had finally arrived, they traveled not in ships of burning light. They came wrapped in cloaks of absolute nothing. We finally understood. The great silence had not been peace. It was simply the universe holding its breath, waiting for them to find us. We had spent centuries looking up, wondering if we were the only ones. We dreamed of contact. We imagined wise mentors or noble rivals. We never, in our worst nightmares, imagined this: an enemy that did not announce itself, an enemy that blotted out the very suns we orbited. Their arrival was not an invasion. It was an erasure, a quiet, patient, and terrifying correction to our sense of importance. We were no longer the universe's inheritors. We were simply in the way. The fleet we sent to meet them was our species' crowning achievement. 117 warships, gleaming vessels named Indomitable and Starbreaker. They were the sharpened tip of our spear. They gathered at the edge of our home system, a shield of alloy and human courage. Our Grand Admiral sent a message, a broadcast of peace, strength, and a demand for explanation. The shadows offered no reply. They just kept coming. A silent, patient tide of black. Our first volley was a sight to behold. Lances of coherent light and plasma torpedoes. They crossed the void in a brilliant, angry wave. They struck the leading edge of the darkness. And they vanished. Not deflected, not absorbed with a flash of energy shielding. They simply ceased to exist, as if we had thrown baseballs into a black hole. Our finest weapons were utterly, completely ignored. There was a long, terrible silence on the bridge of our flagship. The silence of dawning, abject horror. Then the shadows finally returned fire. No energy beams, no projectiles, just thin, crimson lines. They flickered out from the darkness. They looked as harmless as laser pointers. They touched the hulls of our proudest ships. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a ship's reactor would overload. Its spine would break. The vessel would bloom into a silent, expanding flower of fire. It was not a battle. It was a harvest. In 100 hours, our entire defense fleet was reduced to drifting, incandescent scrap. After our fleet burned, They came for our home. They filled the sky above our world. A sky that had been blue for billions of years. It was now an oppressive ceiling of black. Then we saw the red threads descend. They lanced down into our great cities, New York, Tokyo, London. But there were no explosions, no mushroom clouds. Where the red threads touched, the steel and glass and concrete transformed. They became a smooth, shimmering, crystalline substance. Our cities were turned into monuments of glass, a swift, silent, and absolute ruin. The evacuation was chaos. There was no grand, organized retreat. Only a desperate, panicked scramble for the sky. Spaceports were overrun with terrified crowds. People fought for a place on any ship that could still fly. Cargo haulers designed for grain, luxury yachts for the rich, ancient, mothballed survey ships. Anything that had a working engine and a sealed hull became a lifeboat. We fled with stolen ships and broken hearts. We ran from the memory of a beautiful blue sky. I found myself on a heavy ore freighter, the Iron Hope, a name that now seemed like a cruel joke. Its cavernous holds were packed with thousands of survivors. We were shoulder to shoulder in the dim, humid darkness. Engineers worked frantically to rig emergency life support. They bypassed systems meant for inert rock to keep human beings alive. The ship groaned and shuddered as it broke orbit, leaving behind everything we had ever known. We were a ghost fleet, a sad flotilla of the damned. We did not look back. No one could bear it. The ship's captain had disabled all the external viewports. He said it was for morale. But we all knew it was an act of mercy. To see our home being unmade would have broken us completely. So we stared at gray metal walls instead. We listened to the hum of the recycler. We breathed the stale air. And we remembered. We remembered sunlight on our faces, the smell of rain, the sound of children laughing in a park. Memories were all we had left. They were our heaviest cargo. Our new existence was a life lived by sensor readings. We drifted in the cold, deep void, always looking back, always watching them. And the data we gathered painted a picture of horror beyond our imagining. The shadows were not conquerors. They did not want our culture or our resources in the way we understood them. They were something far, far worse. A truth that chilled us more than the cold of space itself. Our long-range spectrographs told the story. We saw massive sections of Earth's crust being lifted away, torn free from the mantle by invisible forces, pulled into the silent, waiting maws of the shadow vessels. We watched as they boiled our oceans into space. The water vapor was greedily siphoned off. They were drinking our seas. Then they started on the atmosphere itself, thinning it layer by layer, like peeling an orange. They were not an army. They were a harvesting entity. They came to consume our very planet. The glassed cities were just pest control, a way to quiet the noisy insects before the meal. The realization settled into our souls. We were not a defeated people. We were an interrupted course on a menu. There could be no negotiation, no surrender. You do not reason with a famine. You do not plead with a swarm of locusts. You only run. And so we ran, deeper into the darkness than humanity had ever gone before. This understanding redefined our flight. We were not just escaping a victorious enemy. We were escaping a natural disaster on a cosmic scale, a predator that hunted on the galactic plane. All our notions of warfare were useless. All our dreams of a heroic counterattack were childish fantasies. Our only goal, our only hope, was to become so small, so quiet, that the monster would lose our scent. We had to learn to become nothing, so we became ghosts. We learned to live in the echoes and the voids. Our fleet masters found hiding places. The turbulent debris of a shattered moon, the thick, sensor-dampening dust of a stellar nursery, the chaotic gravity of a trinary star system. We learned to wrap the environment around us like a cloak. Our survival depended on being a whisper lost in the background static of the cosmos. It was a constant, nerve-wracking state of existence. Life support was the first casualty of our new doctrine. We ran everything on a knife's edge. The lights were kept at a dim, perpetual twilight. The air was thin and metallic. Water was recycled until it was a tasteless, sterile fluid. And the food, oh, the food. It was a nutrient paste, gray and gelatinous. We called it existential gruel, because every spoonful made you question your existence. It was a small joke that kept us sane. Humor was a vital, if scarce, resource. Discipline became our new religion. A single, unauthorized radio burst could be our death sentence. A careless energy spike from a ship's drive could be a dinner bell. Children born in the fleet were taught a special game. It was called Silent Run. They learned to play without shouting, to move without stomping. An entire generation grew up whispering. They were the children of the quiet, the truest ghosts in our spectral fleet. For years we lived this way, drifting from one hiding place to the next. The children knew nothing else. They had never felt gravity above 1G. They had never seen a sky that wasn't a viewport. We told them stories of Earth, of oceans and mountains and wind. To them, it was just a myth, a fairy tale about a magical place. Hope was a dying ember. We were just waiting to fade away. Until one day, we saw God stumble. We were concealed in the outer reaches of a dead system, a cold, forgotten place littered with frozen debris. We were observing a lone harvester, a massive crescent of void passing through the system. It was a routine observation, a practice in cataloging our doom. We watched its silent, majestic passage, filled with the usual mix of terror and awe. But this time was different. This time, there was a flicker. For less than a second, the harvester's perfect blackness wavered. It was like a heat shimmer on a summer road. A brief, violent ripple ran along its edge. In that instant, the cloak of nothingness became translucent. We saw what lay within, a breathtakingly complex web of glowing red energy, a lattice of impossible geometry. Then, just as quickly, the void snapped back into place. It was whole again, a tiny flaw, visible for a heartbeat. It was the most important thing we had ever seen. The flicker was a crack in their armor. Proof, undeniable proof that this was not a divine entity. It was not a force of nature. It was a machine, a vast, powerful, terrifying machine. But still a machine. And machines can be understood. They can have weaknesses. They can be broken. That single, fleeting image changed everything. It did not erase our fear, but it ignited a spark of something we had long forgotten. It ignited a furious, dangerous hope. The data from the flicker spread through the fleet like a shock wave. It sparked frantic, whispered debates in every ship's mess hall. We had found a flaw, a chink in the monolith's armor. But the knowledge was a cruel taunt. What could our tiny, broken fleet possibly do? A direct attack was unthinkable. We were a swarm of gnats against a mountain. We needed a new kind of strategy, a plan born not of strength, but of cunning. The idea came from a quiet, obsessive engineer named Anya. She had lost her family on second chance. For a decade, she had done nothing but study the harvesters. She lived in a world of sensor logs and energy readings. She knew their patterns better than anyone. She presented her plan to the fleet's makeshift council. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with a cold fire. She told them we would not attack the beast's hide. We would attack its hunger. Her plan was elegant and utterly insane. She had noticed the harvesters were drawn to specific energy signatures. Young, energetic stars gave off a radiation profile they found irresistible. Anya proposed we build a lure, a device that would perfectly mimic that signature. We would create a fake star, a feast laid out in the dark. Then, when the beast came to feed, we would poison the meal. We would use their own gluttony to destroy them. It was a grand, desperate deception. The council argued for 3 days. To build Anya's lure would consume nearly all our remaining resources. It would require the fusion cores from our last 3 military-grade ships. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. If it failed, we would be truly defenseless, stranded in the dark with no hope of escape. But the alternative was to keep running forever, to slowly fade into nothing. The vote was close, but in the end, desperation won. The grand deception was approved. The decision transformed the ghost fleet. The quiet, depressive pallor lifted. It was replaced by a focused, determined energy. Every ship became a factory. Every engineer, a revolutionary. We began to forge our single, desperate hope from the wreckage of our past. We were no longer just surviving. We were building our revenge. And it gave us a purpose we had not felt since we saw a blue sky. Our few remaining warships were sacrificed without ceremony. Their powerful fusion cores were carefully extracted. The hearts of our once great navy. They would provide the power for our great lie. The hulls of derelict freighters were melted down. Their raw materials were repurposed for the weapon's casing. It was a somber, industrial ballet. We were dismantling our history to build a future. Every circuit board, every meter of wiring was salvaged from a ship with a story, a ghost of a lost crew. The weapon itself was Anya's masterpiece. She called it the Resonance Cascade Emitter, the Echo for short. It was not a bomb. It would not create a massive explosion. It was far more insidious. It was tuned to a specific harmonic frequency, the same frequency as the red energy lattice we had glimpsed. The echo would not shatter the harvester. It would make it tear itself apart from the inside. A scalpel designed with perfect precision to cut the heart out of a god. It was a weapon born from grief and advanced physics. The work was relentless. Teams of technicians worked in rotating shifts. Their faces were pale under the harsh work lights, etched with exhaustion and fierce concentration. They knew what was at stake. They were crafting humanity's last stand, and they were building it with their bare hands. Out of nothing but scraps, ingenuity, and a burning desire to hit back. Just once. The Stardust Dancer was chosen as the delivery vehicle. It was a small, swift courier ship, the fastest vessel in our fleet. Its pilot was a young man named Kale. He was one of the children of the quiet, born in the dark of the fleet. He had never set foot on a planet. He volunteered for the suicide mission without a moment's hesitation. When the Admiral asked him why, he just shrugged. He said he wanted a chance to make some noise for a change. His bleak humor was infectious. We chose the system carefully. A cosmic graveyard, a lonely brown dwarf star that had long since failed. It was orbited by nothing but cold rock and dust. No life, no strategic value. It was the perfect, forgotten corner of the galaxy for an ambush. The rest of us, the entire Ghost Fleet, moved in behind the system's largest moon. We powered down every non-essential system. We became rocks among rocks, silent, invisible, waiting. Kale flew the Stardust Dancer into the center of the system. He found a stable position and killed the ship's momentum. Then he activated the echo. The effect was instantaneous and breathtaking. Our hidden sensors lit up. A colossal energy signature bloomed in the void. It perfectly mimicked a young, hot, vibrant star. A brilliant, beautiful lie in the absolute darkness. It was a beacon of false hope. A siren song broadcast across the void. A desperate invitation. Dinner is served. We waited. The silence on our command bridge was a physical weight. Every tick of the chronometer was a hammer blow against our nerves. An hour passed, then 2. Doubt began to creep in. Had it been for nothing? Had we wasted our last chance? Then the sensor officer's voice cut through the tension, thin and strained. "Contact, long range. It's big." A wave of relief and terror washed over us. A single harvester shadow, larger than any we had recorded. It was changing course. It was coming for our lure. The harvester entered the dead system with the silent arrogance of an apex predator. It was a moving hole in space, a crescent of absolute black that blotted out the distant star fields. It dwarfed Kale's tiny ship. The Stardust Dancer looked like a single grain of sand before a tidal wave. The harvester had hunted for eons. It had devoured countless worlds. It had no reason to suspect that its prey was finally learning how to bite back. On our command bridge, we watched the tactical display. The harvester slowed its approach. It was cautious, probing. Fine, crimson threads extended from its hull. They reached out to taste the energy of our fake star, to analyze its radiation, to check for poisons. But Anya had been meticulous. The Echo's output was a perfect symphony of simulated stellar physics, a complex, layered deception. The harvester was convinced. The meal was safe. A section of the creature's black hull began to retract. It peeled back like the petals of a nightmare flower. It exposed the glowing red lattice within. The core of the beast. It was preparing to feed. This was the moment. The culmination of a decade of running. The focus of all our pain and all our hope. Our fleet admiral, an old woman with tired eyes, leaned toward her microphone. Her voice was a bare whisper, but it carried across the fleet. "Kale, light the candle." A single command pulse crossed the void. The trap was sprung. The Echo did not detonate. It released a single, pure, resonant frequency, a note that hummed in perfect harmony with the harvester's internal lattice. At first, the effect was strangely beautiful. The web of red energy inside the beast began to glow brighter. It pulsed in time with our weapon's song. It looked like a vast, star-born cathedral being illuminated from within. But the beautiful harmony quickly soured. It climbed into an unbearable, discordant shriek. The lattice began to vibrate uncontrollably. Hairline fractures of white light appeared across its surface. The cracks spread, branching out like lightning. The harvester shuddered in a violent, silent convulsion. It was a death agony on a planetary scale. Its cloak of void flickered and died. For one horrifying second, we saw its true form, a biological monstrosity fused with crystalline technology, a nightmare of flesh and wires. Then, with a final, silent spasm, it imploded upon itself. But its death was not the end. As the creature collapsed, it unleashed a wave, not of shrapnel, not of energy. It was a psychic shockwave, a raw, telepathic scream of pure agony and incandescent rage. It washed over our hidden fleet like a tsunami of madness. It tore through our hull plating. It slammed into our minds. It was the sound of a dying god, and it broadcast its pain into the mind of every living human in the fleet. We had our victory, but its price was a piece of our sanity. The scream was not just sound, it was images. feelings, knowledge. We saw glimpses of its vast, ancient consciousness. We saw it feeding on other worlds, other species. We felt its cold, unfeeling hunger. The wave of pure mental trauma was devastating. Across the fleet, men and women collapsed. They screamed in sympathy with the dying beast. Pilots lost control of their ships. Engineers stared blankly at exploding consoles. We had traded one kind of enemy for another. The silent, physical threat was gone. It was replaced by a screaming ghost that now lived in all our heads. After the psychic storm faded, it left a terrible quiet, a ringing silence in our minds. And in that silence, a new horror began to dawn. Our analysts, their faces pale and streaked with tears, pieced together the fragments. The scream was not just a death cry. It was a message, a final, desperate report fired off to its masters. The torrent of alien thoughts contained information. And that information redefined our enemy entirely. The immense harvester we had destroyed. It was not a warship. It was not even an individual. It was a single cell, a remote foraging unit, a microscopic tendril of a single, vast, star-spanning consciousness. We had not slain a dragon. We had clipped its claw, and in doing so, we had alerted the entire beast to our existence. For a decade, we had been hiding from scouts. Now, we had the undivided attention of the central mind. Our clever trap, our one great victory, had done nothing but ring a very loud dinner bell for a far larger monster. It was the ultimate cosmic joke. We had thrown all our resources, all our hope, into this one attack. We celebrated our victory for a few brief, glorious seconds. Before realizing our triumph was the equivalent of a mouse successfully biting a tiger. A brave gesture, perhaps, but one that only clarifies the mouse's position on the food chain. Our enemy was not an army we could defeat ship by ship. It was a singular, galactic plague, and we had just made ourselves its primary target. But within the psychic trauma, there was a gift, a poison pill of information we never intended to receive. The harvester's death scream was a focused beam of data, a final report sent home. And like any transmission, it had a point of origin and a destination. Buried deep within the chaotic carrier wave of the scream, our analysts found it. A clear, repeating set of star-borne coordinates. A map leading directly to the source, the central node of the entire entity. They called it the Elder Core. The name echoed in our minds, a lingering fragment of the alien broadcast. The brain of the beast, the heart of the hive. For the first time, our enemy had a location. For the first time, it had a name we could speak. It changed the entire dynamic of our struggle. For 10 years, we had been the hunted. We ran. We hid. We prayed not to be found. But now, we had a target. The knowledge was terrifying. The odds were impossible. But for the first time since we fled a blue sky, we were the ones on the hunt. The mood in the fleet shifted. The terror remained. The psychic scars were raw and painful. But beneath it all, a new feeling took root. A cold, grim, and terrible resolve. We were no longer refugees. We were an instrument of vengeance. We gathered our battered ships. We counted our dead. We patched our hulls and our minds as best we could. Then, we turned our fleet toward the coordinates, toward the Elder Core. It was a one-way trip, a final, desperate charge into the heart of the abyss. But it was a charge we would make together. The journey to the Elder Core was the longest of our lives. We did not bother with stealth. They knew we were coming. The psychic scream had been our calling card. Our engines burned hot and bright. We pushed our weary systems past every safety limit. We were a fleet of ghosts no longer. We were a flaming arrow, aimed at the heart of the thing that had murdered our world. Every soul aboard our ships knew this was the final act. There would be no escape, no retreat. There was only the mission. We arrived in the designated system, and what we saw there almost broke our resolve. The Elder Core was not a ship. It was a planetoid, a small world encased entirely in that same black, light-devouring material. And it was not alone. It was surrounded by a fleet of thousands of harvesters. They hung in the darkness like a swarm of cosmic hornets guarding their nest. As our small fleet warped into the system, the entire swarm turned as one to face us. A silent, unified threat of unimaginable power. We did not wait for them to attack. Our admiral gave the order. For Earth! Our tiny, battered fleet charged. We threw ourselves at their wall of ships with the fury of a cornered species. We had no grand strategy, no more secret weapons. We had only our rage and our remaining ammunition. We fired everything: old nuclear missiles, kinetic railguns salvaged from asteroid miners, even the ship's defensive cannons. It was a futile, glorious assault. The battle was a slaughter. Our ships were torn apart, swatted from the sky by those silent red threads. The void filled with the fire of our dying vessels. But we did not break. For every ship they destroyed, we carved a path. We punched a hole in their perfect formation. We were not trying to win a battle. We were trying to clear a path for one ship. The Stardust Dancer. With Kale at the helm, he carried our last weapon, a second, smaller echo device, and its target was the Elder Core itself. Kyle's final defiant song. We succeeded. Our sacrifices created a corridor through the chaos. Kyle flew the Stardust Dancer through the storm of fire. He dodged and weaved through the enemy fleet. A single brave soul carrying the hope of our entire species. He reached the surface of the core, a planet of pure blackness. He was so close. The enemy fleet ignored our dying ships. They turned their full attention on him, converging on the little courier ship. Kale's voice came over the fleet-wide communication. It was calm, steady. It's been an honor. He did not try to escape. He plowed the Stardust Dancer directly into the surface of the Elder Core, and at the moment of impact, he triggered the final echo. The resonance wave washed over the planetoid. Not a song this time. A shriek. A focused blast of harmonic chaos aimed at the mind of the beast. We saw the black surface ripple. We saw cracks of brilliant white light form. Then the Elder Core erupted. A silent, final detonation that consumed the entire enemy fleet in its fire. In the aftermath, there was only silence. Our surviving ships, less than 20 of them, drifted in the void. We stared at the empty space where the Elder Core had been. It was over. We had won. The psychic network that bound them together was gone. The remaining harvesters across the galaxy were now just mindless, drifting hulks. We had cut the head from the serpent. The cost was immense. We had lost almost our entire fleet. We had lost generations of friends and family. We stood victorious in the ruins of their power. We were a handful of survivors in a vast, empty universe. But it was our universe again. We had earned our tomorrow with blood and fire and the courage of a young man who just wanted to make some noise. We did not call it glory. We did not call it vengeance. We called it survival. And it was enough. For the first time in a very long time, we began the slow journey home. Not to the world we had lost, but to a future we had won.